If life can exist in the McMurdo Dry Valleys, can it also be present on Mars? That's a question National Geographic asked, and it really grabs you, doesn't it?
It does. It makes you think, well, if life can survive there, maybe our definition of habitable is just too narrow.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. We've got a couple of really great sources. One's Life in Extreme Places
Yeah.
from National Geographic, sort of the big picture view.
And the other is Thriving at the Limits of Life from Rudolphina magazine, which zooms right in on some incredible specific examples.
Right. So our mission here is to figure out, what actually makes a place extreme? How do things live there?
And crucially, what does all this tell us about looking for life beyond Earth? It's a big question.
Okay, let's start with that word extreme.
Yeah.
Nat Geo introduces us to extremophiles, basically, organisms that love, or at least tolerate, conditions we'd find totally harsh, ice, boiling water, that kind of thing.
Yeah, but the Rudolphina article makes such a good point here. It says extreme is really a question of perspective.
Perspective, meaning extreme for us.
Exactly. We humans have pretty small comfort zone, right?
Yeah.
But for loads of other organisms, what we see is incredibly harsh, is just home, normal,
Like, the middle of the ocean, we couldn't live there.
not for long. And Rudolphina uses the example of microorganisms in the ocean. Ocean currents push them all over the place, so they have to cope with massive changes in temperature, pressure, food.
So that constant change isn't extreme for them, it's just Tuesday.
Pretty much. Their normal is incredibly varied compared to ours.
Okay, that makes sense. So these seemingly barren places might not be barren at all. Let's get into some specific examples. Nat Geo starts with the McMurdo Dry Valleys in Antarctica.
Ah, yes, the dry valleys. They look like another planet. Seriously, it's incredibly cold, super dry.
And weirdly, not much ice or snow on the ground.
Right, because the Transantarctic Mountains block it all. It's like a desert, but a frozen one.
Hmm.
And that's why it's so interesting for Mars comparison.
It's our best Earth analog for Mars, basically. The article mentions NASA's Viking landers back in the 70s. They look for life on Mars.
They did. And the results were, well, confusing,
Right.
ambiguous. And this is before we really knew about all these extremophiles thriving right here on Earth. Our definition of life was much stricter then.
So finding life in the dry valleys now changes the game for Mars exploration.
It certainly broadens the possibilities. If microbes can make a living in Antarctic rock, maybe Martian microbes could too, or maybe they did in the past. It suggests we should, look in slightly more sheltered places on Mars, maybe just under the surface.
Okay, so from the freezing cold to, well, the complete opposite. Rudolphina takes us deep underwater. Hydrothermal vents.
Yeah, the East Pacific Rise. Picture this.
Right.
Absolute darkness, thousands of meters down. The pressure is immense enough to crush a submarine if it wasn't built incredibly strong.
And the water temperature is all over the place, right? Near freezing mostly, but right near the vents.
It's spewing out water that's incredibly hot, hundreds of degrees Celsius, full of chemicals from inside the Earth, like volcanic soup. Sounds pretty bad.
Totally hostile. And yet,
And yet, you've got these amazing ecosystems, like the giant tube worm, Riftia pachyptilla. These things could be huge, meters long.
and they don't eat in the way we think of eating.
Nope. No mouth, no gut as adults. They rely entirely on bacteria living inside them. It's a symbiosis, a partnership.
Okay, how does that work? What do the bacteria do?
So these bacteria are amazing. They take the chemicals coming out of the vents, nasty stuff like hydrogen sulfide, smells like rotten eggs, and they use the chemical energy to make food. It's called chemosynthesis.
Instead of photosynthesis using sunlight, they use chemicals.
Exactly. They're like tiny chemical power plants living inside the worm, feeding it from the inside out. No sunlight needed.
That is just wow. Okay, but then there's another twist, right? The Rudolphin article mentioned something about where these worms live.
Oh yeah, this was a huge discovery by Monica Bright and her team. They didn't just find them clustered around the vents on the seafloor, they found them underneath it.
Under the seafloor. How?
In this network of cracks and cavities within the volcanic rock, like little underground apartments near the main vent, the suburbs of the volcano, as the article puts it.
How do they even get there?
It seems the volcanic activity itself creates this sort of suction effect. It pulls seawater, along with the tiny worm larvae, down into these porous rocks.
So the volcano is actually seeding these hidden habitats.
It looks like it.
Yeah.
And the water flowing through there is still warm enough and has enough of those key chemicals.
And is it still extreme down there in those cavities?
Well, here's the thing. According to Monica Bright, the conditions inside those hollows are actually pretty comfortable for the worms. She says it's well within the limits of what they usually need.
Comfortable. Inside volcanic rock,
Mm.
below the crushing deep sea.
It really drives home that perspective idea, doesn't it? What seems utterly extreme to us is a cozy home for Riftia.
It really does. Okay, so we've had extreme cold, extreme pressure, and heat. Rudolphina also talks about another group of organisms, the archaea. These sound like the ultimate survivors.
Oh, they absolutely are. Archaea are microorganisms, single-celled, but they're distinct from bacteria, and they are masters of living where, frankly, almost nothing else can.
Like where? What kind of places?
Think boiling hot springs, water that's incredibly acidic, or super alkaline or saltier than the Dead Sea. They handle insane pressure, even high radiation doses.
Didn't the article say some can reproduce at 122 degrees Celsius? That's well above boiling.
Yep, 122 degree. That's the record holder for growth temperature, an archaea species.
Yeah.
It pushes what we thought were the absolute thermal limits for life. Krista Schlepper, who studies them, says they really teach us about the physical boundaries of life on Earth.
How do they do it? Do they have special tricks, biologically speaking?
They do. Their cell structures are different. For instance, the ones that love heat have proteins that are folded really compactly so they don't unravel when it gets hot.
Okay, stronger proteins. What else?
And their outer membrane, their skin basically, is held together by different chemical bonds, interlipids, not the ester lipids that bacteria and our cells have. It's just tougher, more stable in harsh conditions.
And genetically, they're kind of weird too. Not quite bacteria, not quite like us.
That's right. They're their own domain of life. They have some features like bacteria, like a circular chromosome, but the machinery they use for reading their DNA and making proteins, that looks more like the machinery in our cells in eukaryotes.
So a unique branch on the tree of life, perfectly suited for these tough spots.
Exactly. And Krista Schlepper makes the point again, similar to the tube worms for these archaea, these conditions aren't even necessarily extreme. Evolution seems to have pushed them into these niches, and they've adapted so well that they're completely comfortable there. It's just their normal.
It's incredible. So looking back at all this, the dry valleys, the deep sea vents, the archaea, what are the big lessons here? What should we take away?
Well, first, that point about perspective just keeps coming back.
Yeah.
Our human definition of extreme is, well, limited. Gerhard Herndl in the Rudolphina piece really emphasizes that. Life is way more flexible than we might assume based on our own needs.
And the other big theme seems to be cooperation.
Definitely. Look at the tube worms and their bacteria. That symbiosis, that partnership, is the key to them colonizing those vents. Neither could do it alone.
One provides the safe house, the other provides the food from chemicals.
Precisely. And Krista Schlepper mentions that this kind of mutualism, organisms helping each other, is incredibly common, maybe even more effective than just competing all the time.
It even applied to the scientists studying them, didn't it?
Absolutely. Monica Bright talked about how the geologists knew about the cavities under the vents, and the biologists knew about the worms, but they didn't connect the dots initially.
Until they talked to each other.
Right. That interdisciplinary work, biologists and geologists sharing knowledge, was crucial for that discovery of the suburbs. A lesson in cooperation for science, too.
And just thinking about that tube worm life cycle again, it starts with the gut, eats normally, then ditches it all for the bacteria.
Yeah, it undergoes this radical transformation, loses its mouth and digestive system entirely as it matures, and fully commits to the symbiotic bacteria doing the chemosynthesis. And they grow incredibly fast on that diet.
Wow. It really makes you wonder about the hidden partnerships driving life everywhere.
It does. The deep interconnectedness, the surprising strategies that allow life to persist and even flourish in places we thought were impossible.
So, summing it all up, life is just unbelievably tough and inventive. It finds ways into environments that seem totally inhospitable to us. It stretches our whole definition of what's possible.
It really does. And it forces us to keep an open mind, especially when we think about life elsewhere.
Right. So maybe this is the final thought to leave everyone with. Knowing how life thrives in these extreme places on Earth, what other basic assumptions are we maybe holding on to about what life needs, both here and, out there?
Exactly. What kinds of completely unexpected partnerships or what kind of mind-bending adaptations might be the secret sauce for survival when facing really tough environmental challenges? Challenges we might not even be able to imagine yet.